We have a big, big topic, immigration and ICE and their lawlessness. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Congresswoman Delia Ramirez tonight is that she's a great champion of not just the people in general, but of the immigration fight, and is incredibly knowledgeable. And I've had so many folks reach out to me with questions, so I hope we can get it all in. But we do have a great champion with us tonight. So the topics will be immigration, ICE, militarization of our cities, and marginalized folks in general. So great topics for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and move things along. It looks like we're getting lots of folks on. So thank you for joining us tonight. Again, it's Marie Newman, and this is my Wednesday Night Live. Tonight, we have one of the People's House champions that does great work. Congresswoman Delia Ramirez sits on both the Veterans Committee as well as the Homeland Security Committee, and has done some amazing work and has already passed some bills on those topics. So we're excited to get started. But first, let me introduce Congresswoman Delia Ramirez from Illinois 3. Good to have you.
I'm really excited to be on with you, Marie. Thank you for finding space for me to join you today. I'm really excited to be on.
Good. Well, we're so pleased to have you. You know, part of this is when I introduce what topics we're going to have over the month. Great folks reach out to me from not just my subscribers, but others, and say, hey, these are the things that are really concerning me. So tonight we're going to kind of zero in tightly on those. And among them, so we'll start with your general take on where we're at with ICE. Before we do that, Delia, I do want you to react to that. You may have seen this before. This involves one of our friends. Alderperson Mike Rodriguez shared with the news early this evening that 2 of his staff, who are citizens, were picked up and detained lawlessly and illegally detained. And this is happening everywhere, and they're public servants. So can you imagine if you are not a public servant and how scary it is, even if you're a public servant? So I'm going to let you share a little bit of the reaction to that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, Marie, the idea that they are targeting, detaining, arresting, handcuffing, beating public servants, elected officials is despicable.
Yeah.
It's enraging, and it also feels scary. And I think that what you see is that you have an administration that wants the world to see that if they can do this to elected officials or staff of elected officials, what would they do to you? Terror and cruelty and trying to break people into submission is the point. It's what they were hoping that they could do so people wouldn't come out last Saturday. But I think in Chicago and all over the country, we demonstrated to them, you will attempt to break us. You will attempt to intimidate us. We're still going to show up. Just 3 minutes ago, I saw a quick note that they had just been released.
Good.
So I'm grateful for that. That doesn't mean that the trauma, the impact is not there, and that what they did was unacceptable. Arresting, detaining, and having your own staff, Marie, right? You not knowing where your staff have been taken, conducting a congressional inquiry and not knowing what conditions they're in, what state they're in, is one of the scariest things, I think, as public servants that we have experienced. And in many ways, most would argue, Marie, right? Unprecedented.
Yeah.
You have the federal government attacking, beating, and detaining its own people and its own co-equal branches of government.
Yeah, it's horrible. So the immorality of it is disgusting and horrifying, but the incompetency attached to this is it's beyond shameful. I don't have a really good adverb or adjective for it, because it's so awful that of course it's an immoral what they're doing, and they're breaking a law, but it is a clown car. It is an app to pick up and right now we've just confirmed before we went on the air, I confirmed again, about 70% of the folks that are getting picked up are just law-abiding citizens that have nothing to do with any issue. But they're just scooping them up in these huge dragnets that are just ridiculous and performative. So
it's all performative, Marie.
It really is.
It's to be able to extend the production of a show that they think that we're all starring in. It's horrifying. But I think the other piece that, Marie, beyond the word immoral, because I also struggle with, is there a word that could actually encapture or in yeah, what we are seeing may have not been created just yet. We might have to come up with it ourselves, or some people
I'll
might
work
have
on
an
it.
idea. But cruelty is the point. Terrorizing communities is the point. And I would say that this agency is an agency of terror.
Yeah.
The same agency and the Department of Homeland Security was created to protect the homeland, and now that very same agency is the biggest threat to domestic security.
Yeah, it's no different than the brown shirts were in Nazi Germany. Let's all be very,
That's
very
right.
clear on that. Um, so we've had a lot of activity, right? Particularly in Chicago, Portland, LA, and New York. What I'm particularly proud of, and I want to remind everybody that you, other members of the Illinois delegation, Mayor Brandon Johnson, J.B. Pritzker, our governor in Illinois, and Cook County Commissioner President Tony Preckwinkle all locked arms early on, came together, and have been doing some have put together some very strong measures to protect us. Can you talk about that a little bit, about that process and what you've done so it makes people feel like they have a little bit of a bulwark?
Yeah, yeah. I would say to you, let me start by saying that so much of this work is happening on the ground. It's
Yes.
everyday people. Marie, today I met with rapid responders, people in the neighborhood who, in the last few months, said, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and not be able to say that I was doing everything I could to stand up for my community and use whatever privilege I may or may not have to be able to do something. These are the very same people that are now creating human school buses, taking kids to and from school so that mothers and fathers don't have to live in fear when they drop off their child. They will be dragged out of the car, beaten, and taken while their 5, 6, 7 year old watches. These are the very same people, Marie, that are providing footage, like the evidence necessary to be able to file these lawsuits and actually win. Um, and I would say to you, many of them said to me, Congresswoman, we know that we are risking our lives in this moment for daring to stand up and rapidly respond to what we're seeing on the streets. The very same government that was set to protect us is working to harm us, to beat us, and in some cases, sometimes it feels like taunting us to try to kill us. I mean,
Yeah.
and yet they keep showing up. Yet they continue to provide support. They've created their own solidarity and strategies to be able to protect each other, to begin identifying who these agents are, where they're showing up, who is filming what, who is checking in with the family. So let me first start, Marie, and you and I come from community grassroots organizing, and we recognize that so much of this isn't really the elected officials. While they are important, it's the people on the ground doing the work. Secondly, I would say that establishing an intergovernmental collaboration has been more important than ever. Asking ourselves, in absence of Congress exerting its authority, um, in some ways, because Republicans are in control, they have given all their power to Donald Trump and the executive branch. What can we be doing at the state level? And I do want to give kudos to Mayor Brandon Johnson, who has said, well, then we're going to start issuing our own executive orders. You will not be staging in City of Chicago property.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk to all of our businesses about the fact that they are private businesses and they don't have to allow ICE to stage in their parking lots. And that goes to places like Home Depot, who in many ways, Marie, are working with ICE. I've met with them directly, and what they say to me and what we are seeing is absolutely inconsistent, right? And then I think it's important to say that local elected officials are working on ordinances to provide more protections, to affirm that CPD does not work with ICE. And there are some instances where rapid responders are providing footage of when it feels like perhaps there's some indirect support. And then the governor, right, really holding the line with so many of us and demanding accountability in this moment. I also think, Marie, that the state legislature is going into veto session,
Mhm.
and a number of community organizations are demanding that a state legislature in Illinois that has a supermajority pass as many protections as they possibly can next week in veto session. And they're calling it SALT. I can't remember the acronym, what it stands
Right,
for,
right,
but you
right.
and I both know the SALT melts ice, right?
Yeah,
It's a a cool name for it. But the bills are keeping ICE well, they've passed the ICE out of schools.
yeah,
Lillian Jimenez passed that. They seem not to respect it because you've seen some tear gassing near a school, but at least they cannot come into the schools. They're now trying to pass legislation to keep them out of the courts. So not just in Cook County, but entire state of Illinois, and keeping them out of hospitals and clinics. People are not going to the hospital or to the
I
doctor
know.
from fear. I have doctors and I have hospital directors telling me, Congresswoman, in some cases, we have a 40% no-show rate for people who have chronic illnesses who are no longer getting their medicine. So the ICE out of hospitals and clinics is going to be really critical. And then expanding and strengthening what they call the Trust Act, which is a legislation that ensures that local police and local governments are not in collaboration working with ICE enforcement. So they have a lot of work on their plate. And
And
I feel like the elected officials on the ground are doing a lot of this work. Marie, the other thing I think it's important to say because it feels very demoralizing, and sometimes people could feel very helpless, that there are some wins that we've had in the courts.
good.
One of
How?
those is, yeah, you've seen some of this already. And one of those has been that they've had to remove the fence at Broadview,
Yeah, it's good.
especially when you recognize the tensions and what has happened in Broadview. ICE agents are now court ordered to use body cameras
Mm,
despite of the fact that Kristi Noem is saying we're in a government shutdown, we can't afford cameras. You and I both know that's a lie because if she can afford $200 million for private jets, she could afford body cameras during a shutdown. But the courts have demanded these body cameras, and the judge has gone as far as to say, I'm prepared to hold them in contempt should they not use them. The former ICE field director was demanded to come and testify. He did not come. Instead, what you all saw on Friday, he left. He ran off and went back to DC. But ICE staff were required to go to the court. And now George Bombino, I think his last name, who is in charge of Customs Border Patrol, and in many cases responsible for the Midway Blitz operation, will now have to come to court and
yeah,
respond to what's happening. So I want you to know that it feels like an invasion. We're under
right.
siege. Our communities are under attack. And the work that we're doing on the ground, the lawsuits, all of this has been really critical to begin pushing and really passing some accountability measures from an agency that has gone rogue.
And I will say to add to that list, and that was a really heartening list, right? There's a lot going on that's good. The circuit court that ruled on the
Mhm.
restraining order against the militarization of Chicago
That's right.
upheld it over the last
Major.
24 hours. So that is, we do have good news, folks out there, because one of the things I wanted to do with having Congresswoman Ramirez on is to talk about the good news. There are protections, right? And we're doing everything within our power, and we're having some wins too. I would say up to 50% of the time we're getting wins. Um, but
And the courts. Mhm.
so yeah, in the courts for sure, and then also, folks, like I just will tell you, we're winning at Broadview. I know it doesn't feel like it, and here's what I will tell you though is that whether it is a No Kings March, an ICE protest, and I've been at all of them. Every time I go to the ICE protest and film it and then put it on social media, the MAGA crowd gets real worried and real upset. They're kind of like
Mhm.
snowflakes, right? And what I say back to them is like, it's interesting that you think that this doesn't work, but you're real worried about it. So,
Uh,
so that is definitely
yeah.
happening. What do you think? Um, so let's say we get past Chicago. Let's say that we live through the next 3 months. It starts to get cold out, and the troops. It's not so easy to keep the troops here and keep the ICE agents here, and they move on and they go to another city, which would be horrible. But I think we're all adults here, and we know that's going to happen, right? Um, What do you think their end game is what many have suggested, and Governor Pritzker has even said this, is that this is a practice for the general election day next year, where we're going to see both ICE agents and federal agents everywhere. Do you think it's that grave?
I think it is. And Marie, I want to be the most optimistic person in this moment. We are living in fascism. We're not.
It's not
We're
going
fed from it. We're not democratically backsliding anymore. We have done all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Donald Trump has decided that under the purview of the Homeland Security, an agency that was established with too much latitude
Right.
and not enough guardrails, that this would be the agency beyond the Department of Defense, interesting enough, that
Right.
he could use and weaponize in order to try to end free and fair elections.
Yeah.
He has one thing I want to say, just coming back to Chicago, and then I want to quickly move back to your question about like what does this mean
Yeah.
for the broader conversation, is that first, he's testing to see how far he can go in the city of Chicago because he knows that Chicago has been the epicenter in many ways to resistance. It has been ground zero to community organizing and to
Right.
liberation. We've seen that in labor movement. We've seen that standing up for immigrants. We've seen that in the Black Lives Matter movement. And so he believes that if he can break Chicago down, then he has the model necessary to do this in every other city. Just, I joke with some of our folks on the ground, no pressure on us, right? To be able to demonstrate all the ways that we push back, the creative ways we do that, and the way that we collaborate to hold the line and to really demonstrate that they won't break our soul. They certainly won't break the city of Chicago because we understand the assignment to be able to resist in such way that it stops them from doing this in other places. But the second piece I think is important, and people need to be watching very closely, is that Donald Trump is beginning to create police forces within USCIS. USCIS is one of the departments of within Homeland Security. You have ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. You have CBP, which is Customs Border Patrol. Like CBP should not be in Chicago, but they're here. Somehow they believe that within the water because of Lake Michigan, and Lake Michigan connects to the rest of the lakes,
Canada.
Lake Erie,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden Canada. That's how they determine that they have jurisdiction. So so ICE and CBP already have a policing mechanism.
Right.
He is now establishing a police force within USCIS, but within and in part so that when people go to court, do the right thing, the legal thing, the follow the law thing that they're doing, that they can be immediately arrested by paperwork people that are responsible for passports, visas, and green cards. But two is he wants to create his own force within Homeland Security that loyalty is not to the country, not to the Constitution, but to Donald Trump.
Right.
Because I think he fears that the armed services who have taken an oath to protect the homeland, to protect, and they've taken an oath and an oath seriously to protect our Constitution or democracy, may not always be loyal to him because their loyalty is to the country and not to him. So he is talking about establishing within the guidelines of Homeland Security the kind of police or army force, and he's already financed $150 billion towards it in the bill that he passed, so that they be the force that he uses to try to end free and fair elections.
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't what we were seeing or what we think will happen, but it's exactly what we see in the way that they are using that agency to establish this army.
Yeah. And
This new army.
let's tether this for a moment because we're going to zigzag for a couple of minutes, but I do want to tether it for a moment to the shutdown. So, folks, in the big, awful, ugly bill, there was money set aside to expand ICE by what, tenfold, I would say. And what
Becoming the fifth largest army in the world if it was an army, $150 billion agency.
That puts a very fine point on it. And the point that I'd like to support your points with, Delia, is that with that, what's interesting during the shutdown, and as horrible as the shutdown is, and it is hurting people, folks, let's all be clear, and it's going to get real ugly really fast when we start getting the letters that indicate from our private insurers saying that you're going to be paying 100% more than you were before. So this will get ugly. The one minor, I guess we'll call it a little bit of a tiny silver lining is that this slows down his ability to do some of the things that he wants to do. One of which is to really put teeth into the training part of this new army that Congresswoman just talked about. So there's a tiny, tiny silver lining there. But with regard to the shutdown, where are we with troops being paid? And I want you to explain for everybody why we're still holding the line, even though all Democrats want them to be paid, including every Democrat in Congress. So can you talk about that for a little bit? I think that's a little confusing to people.
Yeah. So we are now, on day 22 of the government shutdown?
Right.
In 22 days, that should never have had to happen.
No.
Unfortunately, what we have seen in the last 10 months is that every major piece of legislation has passed for the most part with a little to no input from Democrats.
Right.
And they have not in any way done the budgeting process, the appropriation process that you and I both know in the House to pass these 12 appropriation bills, send them to the Senate, and then pass them. They have been living in what we call the continuing resolution world, where they can't figure things out. They're all really messy. They're trying to terrorize communities, not focus on legislation, sending people on vacation. In some cases, I mean, some of the things that you're seeing Republicans wrapped up in, Maria, Tony Gonzalez, you should look him up, some horrifying things there. But the point is that they're not actually doing the job of legislating, working with us. And they wanted to pass this continuing resolution that in essence would allow for the ACA tax credits that make it more affordable for people to get health care to
Mhm.
expire.
Mhm.
And what we said was, you have now worked with us. You have clawed back money that Congress has given. And now you want us to just vote because you told us to on your continuing resolution that cuts 22 million people from healthcare. And so we said, no, we're happy to vote on a continuing resolution. And it needs to include language that extends these credits.
Yeah.
They said, no, we don't need you. You're going to cave in and we'll just blame you. And I think it's important, Marie, for us to say this. They're in control. They control the White House, they control the Senate, and they control the House of Representatives. At any moment, Marie, today, Johnson can send out a text message and email to us and say, you are summoned to come back to the House. You have 48 hours to present yourself. We're
Right.
going to negotiate and restore the government. They're unwilling to do that
Right.
because they care more about these insurance companies and the billionaires that profit off of people being sick and uninsured than they care about the people. And it's why they won't come back and negotiate. And they think, Marie, that if they pass these one standoff bills, right, we'll pay this group of people because they're worthy, but you're not worthy.
Right.
This practice, it's exercise of determining who's worthy and who's not worthy, which you and I both know is wrong and evil as well. They think if they do that, they will weaken our ability to negotiate on healthcare, and then they will cave in. And look, should military service members get paid? Absolutely. So should the TSA, so should air traffic controllers, and people should not starve on November 1st when their SNAP benefits have been cut or their TANF benefits have been cut. So we all should be doing everything in our power to pass a continuing resolution that opens up the government. And Johnson and Thune are unwilling to do that. And they think if they blame us, they can continue to do so. And they think that if they start passing these standoffs, that they don't really care because Donald Trump will continue to build his golden room in the White House. And Kristi Noem will take your money and go buy these luxury jets so that she can travel from state to state, terrorizing people. It's unconscionable, Marie. But they think that the American people don't see what they're doing.
Right. And I'll just make that point to add to your set of points there that of course, we as Democrats and everybody in Congress and all of the Congress people want the military to be paid, but we want everybody to be
Absolutely.
paid, which is why the Democratic Congress, the caucus, is holding the line. It is you come to the table and talk about bringing the healthcare subsidies back to Obamacare, so not everybody has 100% increase. You reverse the cuts on Medicaid and other things, then everybody gets paid. So this is not unreasonable. And we're a country of everybody, not tiny groups. I want my little group to be paid, but not your group. This is about everybody all in and nobody out.
Well, and I think Marie, his strategy has always been picking and choosing who is worthy, who's American enough, who is someone that I want to acknowledge, who is someone that should thrive and who shouldn't.
Right.
That's what he does. And he thinks that if he pits us against each other, his authoritarian agenda and government will be able to succeed. And to your point, like we on October 1st, we should have been passing this continuing resolution. There should not have been one interruption in service, but they have politicized healthcare and everything in between. It is cruelty at this point. Frankly, it's evil. And Marie, the other point you said about it means that we don't want to see people have to pay twice as much. In some cases, what some of our folks that have analyzed the numbers have said, Marie, is 300% increase for family of four.
It will
And what
be.
will end
Yeah.
up happening is that family of four was barely able to pay their insurance then. The four of them will go uninsured, while the community health care centers, the federally qualified health clinics,
Mm.
and the hospitals are also unable to stay open because of a government shutdown.
Right. And there is no backstop. I keep trying to tell everybody this when I talk to them is that um, once you make those Medicaid cuts and you raise everybody's premiums because as a result of this legislation, there is no backstop because then nothing is funded. So that health clinic that's free, that's 6 miles from your house, no, that it will not be open. No, ma'am. That
Yeah,
is
and I
not
think I
available.
think it's so important that you said that, Marie, because some
Yeah.
people, I mean, look, I pay for my mom's health care.
Mm.
She has worked 40 something years in this country, never in a union, unfortunately, didn't have a pension. And when she retired a year and a half ago, all she had was her Social Security, $989 a month.
Yeah.
Last year, with the changes in Medicaid after the emergency declaration went away from COVID, my mom made so little she was eligible for Medicaid and had Medicaid for a year and a half. My mom was knocked off of Medicaid then and called me crying and asking, "I'm diabetic. What do I do?" And so, what would a daughter do? Figure
That's
it
right.
out. And in between meetings and fights and legislative action, I went into the marketplace and I found a plan that I felt was the most comparable to the healthcare she was getting that I
Mhm.
could afford.
Right.
I pay $600 a month because my mom's income is what it is, versus paying $1380 a month, which is what I would pay if the ACA goes away.
Mm.
Well, today my mom said to me, Delia, I turned 65 in January. Just stop paying for my health care.
Oh,
I have enough medicine to get through January. I am a member of Congress.
yeah.
And I think it's important for people to understand that some of us actually understand this personally because we're living into it. That my mom will turn 65 in January, right? Which is around the time that people will, January 1st, and when people have to pay that difference. But if my mom turned 65 in December of next year, I would be paying not just 1480, in some cases, $1,700, $2,000 a month for the same insurance she was getting. And Marie, let's be frank. Healthcare needs to be improved, reformed, expanded.
Mhm.
But what you're talking about with Republicans right now, they're not talking about making it better. They're talking about destroying what we have right now.
Right.
And so it's mind-boggling to me that Republicans can look at their constituents in the eye and say, "Yeah, I don't really give a damn about your health care.
Right.
I just want to make sure that my corporate donors get what they need."
That's right.
It's happening right now.
And really always comes back to money, folks. We talk about that a lot in my columns and on my show. And today we had a real People's House champion, and Delia said it so in such an articulate way that when you have the lived experience, you understand it a lot better. And I've had some of the same trials in my family with healthcare. And when you feel that deeply, you want a congresswoman like Delia and many of her colleagues in the Democratic caucus that truly believe in healthcare. Final question for tonight, Delia, and I ask all my guests this is, what are we ignoring at our risk right now?
Mhm.
What is something that is really like, wow, it's out there, but nobody quite understands the gravity of it, perhaps,
Yeah. It's hard to know where to begin.
right?
But let me start by saying that something that we're ignoring is how much we're normalizing this moment, Marie. That in our willing in our desire to survive what we're seeing, the attacks on every single community. Because you and I both know it's not just immigrant communities, it's not just veterans, it's not just people unhoused, it's not just the trans community. Every single community is under attack by
Mhm.
this fascist government. That in our attempt to mentally make it, we begin to normalize so much of what we're reading and watching. Yeah, I mean, it's terrible that he's doing this, but he did this other thing. And so I really want to caution people to be reminded that none of this is normal,
No.
that creating a new precedent doesn't make it acceptable or doesn't make it right.
Mhm.
And yes, we have to find ways for us to not fall apart and break in this moment,
Right.
but it can't be normalizing what he's doing because what Donald Trump is doing, he's testing how far he can go in all his executive orders, in all his appeals, into the shadow docket with the Supreme Court, and all the things that he sends his puppets, Johnson and Thune, to try to do in the House and in the Senate, in threatening colleagues of mine like LaMonica MacGyver for doing congressional oversight at a detention center in New Jersey, in dragging Senator Padilla onto the ground, or killing a man in Franklin Park in Chicago who they didn't have a judicial warrant to take and then making it up, right? All of that is their way of saying we're going to test how far we could go in order to weaken this democracy in such a way that people won't see it coming and therefore we've taken over. So my thing to you is not a particular issue. There's so many of them.
Mhm.
And you should always watch when a president on day one begins to attack the museums, higher education, community organizing, and organizations helping immigrants, he is not done.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing.
Right.
And it should scare us all, but it also should mobilize us into building collective solidarity. Because what brings me hope is to see that young people at one of my local high schools is learning how to do know your rights training, and is using every vehicle possible to be able to encourage and support people. It's hearing from my constituents at one of my neighborhood schools say, "I'm now part of the human school bus. I've never been involved in my life in my community. I've lived here, Congresswoman, for 7 years, and it's my first time showing up."
I love
So may that radicalize you for community, right? I know
Yeah.
people use the word and the word Trump uses it in a particular way, but I would say that this is also a moment that is calling us all to do more for each other and to also extend grace for each other while also call my colleagues, both in Congress and other places, to do more. And I would say, Marie, I will tell you a thing I say often. Any elected official that is insulted, feels like you're bothering or annoying them by saying that you want to know what they're doing,
Yeah.
chances are they're not doing enough.
Probably.
Keep asking us what we're doing and then ask us to do more.
That's right. And that's very American, folks. That means you love your country. When we want our own party or all of government to do better, it just means that when we all do better, we all do better. Right.
That's
So,
right.
so
And what's
keep
more
asking.
patriotic than that, right, Marie?
It's
What's more
very patriotic.
patriotic
Yeah.
than really stepping in to defend the democracy, freedom of speech, the ability to dissent? To me, that is the greatest embodiment
Yeah.
of patriotism, right? Of really loving your country.
Yeah, this is a love letter to our country, and demonstrates our patriotism every day. And speaking of a great patriot, we so appreciate you,
Mhm.
Congressman Ramirez. You've been hopeful tonight, but also realistic. Where can we find more about your platform? What's the best
Mhm.
place to go to for our subscribers?
Yeah, you can go to our socials. It's probably the easiest. On
Right.
Instagram, I think it's Delia Ramirez.
Yeah.
On Facebook, it's the same. We're also on Twitter and we're on Blue Sky. And there you will see a lot of the latest information. I try to do weekly videos, if
Good.
not more, of what is happening this week and what are things that you can do to get involved. Folks can also subscribe to my newsletter, and I will make sure, Marie, that we put on the chat what that the website for the newsletter for people to
Good.
subscribe,
Good,
and it
good.
just gives you a quick update. But the big thing, Marie, to your point is like, I don't want to just talk to you about what's happening. I want you to feel that there's something you could do.
Right.
Keep calling, keep showing up. Join mutual aid support organizations, rapid response teams, support your local community organizations that are doing the hard work, have been doing it for a very long time. And then keep encouraging your own local electeds to find creative ways for them to defend their constituents, because we need to also protect the sovereignty of our states.
Right. And each of our individual neighborhoods and areas. So we all are powerful and we all can do something. We all can't, vote in Congress, but we all can do something. We can make calls, we can email, we can boycott. And just as a reminder, everybody, we have blackouts coming. So on Black Friday and then again on Cyber Money or Monday, do not buy anything. No consumerism whatsoever. That will send a big message. It will be a void in all of their bank accounts. And that's all they listen to is when the money stops flowing. So do
Perfect
your
example,
blackouts.
Jimmy Kimmel, right? You saw what happened with Disney. All of a sudden, they saw the drops in shares and they brought him back. It
That's
works,
right.
folks.
It does work. Congresswoman Ramirez, we are so happy to have you tonight. And thank you for your time. And please be safe out there.
Thank you, Marie.
Okay. Have a good
Everyone.
night, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.